Thank you very much, Louise, and good morning. As Louise says, I'm here I'm speaking on behalf of the Wales Health Impact Assessment Support Unit, and I've named my colleagues on the slide, and I'm indebted to them. I'm here to present a social science perspective, which I'll say a bit more soon, as well as to respond to Ben's typology, which I think is very useful. Okay, right, well, French is the official language in Quebec, and Wales also has its national language, so it's only right that I should greet you in Welsh. So, Goffion o Gymru means greetings from Wales. Right, we've seen a map of where Ireland is, and here we are, right beside England, but not England. I need to say this because there was a European Union map once that missed Wales off for some reason, caused outrage. And editions of the Encyclopedia Britannica early last century, under the entry for Wales, said, "For Wales, see England." Yeah. Okay, right, well, all this is actually very relevant to the context, as since 1998, we've got a devolved government in Wales, and this has granted us decision-making powers over a number of policy areas, including health. From the outset, Wales, I think we felt, had a much stronger emphasis on the wider determinants of health and health inequalities than in England, and the use of HIA was seen as a way of underpinning this approach. And that's the reason WIASU was set up in 2001 and now is firmly established as a partnership between Cardiff University School of Social Sciences and Public Health Wales, which is the delivery body for public health in Wales. So if I can pause just briefly from the PowerPoint just to talk about the reason why I'm giving a social science perspective. I think there are many advantages in having this arrangement, you know, being a partnership between a university and a public health delivery organisation, because an academic unit has the ability and credibility to do things that statutory services can't. In terms of a social science perspective, I think that we can offer a perspective on thinking about health impact that draws on a sociological understanding of how different kinds of change impact on people's everyday lives. We offer a different kind of lens in terms of thinking about health impact. However, we also offer a way of thinking more generally about health impact assessment itself, as generating particular kinds of knowledge. We've argued, myself and Gareth Williams, for instance, that HIA potentially generates new forms of what we call civic intelligence, which we have defined as the combination of lay knowledge, scientific evidence, and professional judgment grounded in the context in which people live and directed towards decisions and actions. Now, we believe that this is a distinctive and desirable feature of HIA, and actually it should cut across all the types of HIA that Ben and Elizabeth refer to in their paper. Okay, back to the PowerPoint. We believe that this is an approach that supports the ethos, or I should say aspiration, of developing citizen-informed policy-making and decision-making in general. I say aspiration because we have a very long way to go, as my case study will make clear. Since 2001, we've supported many HIAs, over 100, and many now are taking place without any support from us at all. And as you can see, we continue to provide that support. We're providing support for about 7 now. Okay. Types of HIA. Well, yeah, in the 11 years we've been running, we've supported every conceivable type of HIA. Unlike other forms of impact assessment, HIAs can be used for almost any kind of decision. This is its strength and its weakness. Almost like public health itself, the fact that it is everywhere, or can be everywhere, means that it can easily be dismissed and therefore be nowhere, with little traction in important decisions that make important decisions about people's lives. This is why the development of typologies, I think, can be useful in providing some kind of fix so that we can reflect critically on what we are doing in any particular time. In Wales, I would say that whatever type of HIA we support, we encourage the involvement of citizens. It's not always possible, but it is actually difficult to imagine any proposal that did not impact on people's lives and could not be informed by citizen-based insights. In relation to the types of HIA Ben describes, I would say that we started off with an assumption that we were building public health awareness and thinking into the routine decisions of organisations and their partners. In other words, this is Ben's decision support. All other types of HIAs have really developed from this in Wales. Organisations, including universities, have used HIA to advocate for a particular population, where there is a concern for a particular proposal, and communities themselves having expressed an interest in using HIA for their own purposes. Mandated HIAs could be seen as a more recent success of HIA development in Wales. The use of HIA is strongly encouraged in different kinds of planning developments, including the use of waste technologies, new road applications, and applications for open cast or surface mines. These fit into Ben's mandated model. These have largely run alongside EIAs and conducted by consultants and commissioned by developers who, of course, have vested interests where health is generally understood more narrowly. Now, the increase in mandated HIAs has affected that work that we have done as a unit, because instead of capacity building, because consultants are expected to have the necessary skills, our focus has been on ensuring that there is a mechanism to quality review these HIAs. However, our experience of mandated HIAs is that it's much more difficult to ensure that they address the wider determinants of health or involve citizens in more than a tokenistic way. Now, this wasn't the intention of those in the Welsh Government who sought to include HIA in the planning guidance. Mandated HIAs can be a vehicle for excluding citizen concerns. The ways in which this has been done is through a combination of scientific exclusivism, by delegitimizing certain forms of scientific and lay knowledge, bureaucratic proceduralism, in which adhering to the regulatory processes can trump any appeal to involve citizens in a real sense, and by not happening at all. After all, even though it's written to planning guidance, it's not statutory. It is a fairly easy way for HIA not to be taken at all, or undertaken in such a narrow way that it's indistinguishable from the way in which health is considered in any EIA. So I'm going to briefly give you an example of a case study, which was of a waste-to-energy incinerator in a fairly industrialised area of Cardiff called Splot, or as the people call it there, to make it sound posher, Splo. Okay, I don't know how this will translate. As with many places that have suffered years of poor employment opportunities and where the work that's available is poorly paid, the place has a reputation. Much of this is disparaging. A crime-infested crap hole where if you're not being robbed, you're robbing someone. Whilst a more enlightened response recognises the community as a cultural area with a solid working class community, which gets a bit of a bad press. This is relevant to how local people responded to a development of a waste incinerator in their area. Okay, so oops, jump there. Okay. The draft Wales Waste Strategy strongly commends HIA, but in this case, the company didn't commission one. So it should have been a mandated HIA, but ended up being a mixture of community and advocacy. In this case, plans from a waste-from-energy incinerator servicing much of South Wales were submitted in 2009. There had been minimum community consultation apart from a few leaflets, and none of these were translated into the local languages. Local people and agencies discussed the possibility of demanding an HIA. However, before they had a chance to do that, the plans for the incinerator were rejected by the planning committee. Although the planning committee planned to appeal, community interest died down as it was not considered to be a real threat. However, following a breakdown of trust from another planning decision in Splot, local people became interested in HIA again. They were not going to be humiliated, and they did not trust the authorities to reject the company's appeal for the incinerator. WIASU was approached by the local public health team and local regeneration programme. Now, this programme was a part of the Welsh Government's programme called Communities First, which aims to support and improve the lives of the most deprived communities in Wales. They wanted to conduct a rapid HIA that could be used to submit as evidence against the incinerator at their appeal. WIASU researchers and officers supported the HIA by gathering evidence, which included a literature review, the use of local demographic information, a participatory workshop, which involved community members and local stakeholders, and individual and group interviews with people who were thought to be most vulnerable to the development. Our researcher in Cardiff University, Chloe Chatterton, also collected observational data throughout the process, as we believe that such data helps to understand how HIA works in particular circumstances. I said it was a rapid HIA. It had to be, because there was just an 8-week window to ensure HIA was considered at the appeal. So what did it contribute? HIAs of such developments in mandated processes tend to focus on health in the narrowest sense. This was a short space of time, but even in this quick and dirty HIA, I would argue that it shows what local people can contribute more broadly. First, it was not true to say that the views about the development were entirely negative. They recognised the possible employment opportunities as well as the benefits of being offered cheaper energy locally. Although they were angry, the structure of the participative workshop provided a space for residents to think about the possible benefits as well as what mitigation opportunities might work locally. They were also very good at highlighting and identifying the cumulative impacts of living in an area which already had a number of industrial plants. Crucially, the main issues were about the lack of trust between local people and public agencies and the sense of being dumped on as a deprived community yet again. This suggests that a major step forward may be in developing processes that enable local people to engage more systematically in decision-making, as well as in developments such as these, developing interventions where local people are enabled to monitor the effects of new developments afterwards and identify any particular potential health problems. Just quickly, just to linger on this slide, these quotes illustrate the frustration local people felt. The lack of control that is a consequence of exclusion from such processes is a determinant of health in itself, I would argue, as well as being unjust. So in these quotes, they're expressing how angry and excluded they felt from something that was going to happen and affect the people in their area. So what happened next? Well, what happened next was a typical example of a powerful company able to make nimble use of the planning system in a way that local people could not. The company was set to appeal against the original decision by the local planning committee in July 2010. In the meantime, however, the company submitted brand new plans for the incinerator to be reviewed in June. Note that it is earlier than the appeal for the old plans. However, there was uncertainty regarding the date. Now, this meant that there was even less time for the HIA to be considered. However, it was agreed that an interim report could be submitted in early June for the review of the company's new plans. In June the 9th, 2010, the Planning Committee reviewed and accepted the company's new plans. This was in spite of assurances by the Planning Committee members that they would make the report available beforehand and consider its findings. The crucial consequence of the new plans being accepted meant that the appeal against the original decision concerning the original plans were cancelled. So the HIA was completely redundant, it had nowhere to go. And the company was eventually given an operating license in November 2010. So, it's my final slide, just to reassure you. First of all, I would argue that more discussion is needed on mandated HIAs. Okay, they have a particular purpose, but we need to discuss it. Okay, this one wasn't mandated, though it should have been. Instead, local people and local and health and regeneration agencies, with the help of WIAZU, tried to compensate for this by identifying appropriate entry points for engagement. However, our experience of mandated HIAs that have been commissioned by companies is that they find ways anyway to minimize local engagement, and that the planning system itself remains opaque for local people. For this reason, we need always to question the purpose of mandated HIAs, who conducts them, and behalf of whom. We do, I would argue, also need to question the science and evidence base of such developments. It is perhaps a more controversial point I want to argue that I think local people could work with scientists in developing our knowledge of the impact of land use developments and new technologies on health, and not just on the wider determinants on health, but on the on the toxicological effects themselves. We don't have an adequate evidence base from these forms of inquiry as yet. However, there are emerging examples of what's called popular epidemiology or civic science, particularly in the USA, where lay people work alongside scientists to become citizen scientists. The issue is not just to aim to have more mandated HIAs, but to argue for the development of planning regulations that make room for HIAs as a space for engagement. We need regulatory processes that put citizens at centre stage. So rather than having processes that regulate engagement, we create regulations for engagement. As an HIA community, we have an opportunity to suggest ways in which such processes could generate a more just and productive ongoing conversation between planning authorities, developers, citizens, scientists, and other public professionals. Thank you very much. Merci, and diolch yn fawr, as they say in Wales.